So what if the person you thought was in charge actually wasn't? Today we're going to dig into the really extraordinary claims of Paul Hellyer. Now, this isn't just anybody. This was Canada's former Minister of Defense. He was right there at the highest levels of power. And what he came away with was a pretty chilling warning. A warning about who really runs the world, what their ultimate plan is, and a final, massive deception he believed was just around the corner. All right, to even begin to wrap our heads around the world Paul Hellyer is describing, we got to start with this puzzle. This quote here, it's attributed to President Bill Clinton. And think about that for a second. This is a pretty startling thing to hear from a guy who, at the time, was supposedly the most powerful leader on the entire planet. And yeah, that's it, isn't it? That's the big question. If the people we elect, the presidents and so on, aren't the ones steering the ship, then who the heck is? Well, Paul Hellyer was convinced he knew the answer. Okay, so let's get into it. Section 1. A minister's stark warning. According to Hellyer, the answer? Well, it points to this kind of shadow power structure, one he says has been quietly operating behind the scenes for decades. And here it is. This is really the core of his claim. He says, point blank, that a group he calls The Cabal has pretty much taken over control of the United States. I mean, neither the president nor Congress is actually in control. The cabal is. Now, that is a huge statement, right? So how does he back that up? Well, Hellyer argues their power doesn't come from votes, it doesn't come from armies, it comes from their control over the very nature of one thing: money. Which brings us to Section 2, the nature of money. See, Hellyer's whole argument was that if you really want to understand who has the power, you have to follow the money. But more than that, you have to understand how it actually works in our world. Because, as he tells it, it's absolutely nothing like what most of us think. So get this. According to Hellyer's analysis, just 3%, that's the amount of all money out there that's actually physical cash. You know, the coins and bills you have in your wallet. Just 3%. So what about the rest of it? Where is it? Well, that other 97%, he called that virtual money. It's not real in the way we think of it. It's just a digital entry in a computer. It's not backed by gold. It wasn't printed by a government mint. It's literally just data on a server. And that leads to the really crucial question, doesn't it? If 97% of our money is just created digitally, who has their finger on the button? Who actually has the power to press enter and just bring money into existence? Hellyer breaks it down with a pretty simple example. Let's say you want to buy a car. So you go to a bank for a $35,000 loan. You put up some collateral, maybe your house. You sign a note promising to pay it all back with interest. Then the bank just taps on a computer and poof, 35 grand appears in your account. The thing is, he argues, that money did not exist 1 second earlier. It was literally created out of thin air as debt. And this right here, this is what Hellyer called the trap in the system. All this new money is created as debt. But, and this is the big catch, while the loan amount, the principal, is created out of nothing, the money to pay the interest on that loan, that is never created. So he argued this whole setup mathematically guarantees a permanent, always growing cycle of debt for everybody. Okay, let's move on to Section 3, defining the cabal. So if the system is designed this way on purpose, you have to ask, who designed it and who's benefiting from it? This is where Hellyer points the finger at the group he holds responsible. And yeah, he really doesn't hold back. Right at the very top, he says, is the banking cartel. But they're not alone. He claims they work hand in glove with the big oil cartel, huge transnational corporations, and this kind of shadow government made up of the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, and even a big part of the US military. A really powerful, deeply interconnected network that's operating completely outside of the public eye. But why? What's the point of all this? What's the ultimate goal of a group this powerful and this secretive? What's the end game? Well, according to Hellyer, the end game is a single world government. And here's the crucial part. It's not one that's elected by you or me. It's one that's run directly by the bankers and the elites who he says are already pulling all the strings from behind the curtain. Okay, now this is where Hellyer's claims take a turn. We go from a critique of the financial system to something truly out of this world. Because how do you get the entire planet to just accept such a massive, radical change? He believed the plan involved manufacturing a series of threats. He actually points to a warning that's attributed to the famous rocket scientist Wernher von Braun, told by one of his close friends. And the idea is pretty simple. The military-industrial complex, to justify its own immense power and all that spending, has to have an enemy. It always needs an enemy. And if they don't have a real one, they have to manufacture one. And according to this story, von Braun actually laid out the whole sequence. First, the enemy would be the Russians, check. Then the enemy would be terrorists, check. And after that, a final, ultimate threat would be rolled out. And that final manufactured enemy? Extraterrestrials. A staged alien attack designed to terrify the global population into accepting martial law and the final consolidation of power into a new world government. Now, the source material for this actually connects this decades-old theory to some more recent stuff. It highlights this kind of strange back and forth between two former presidents. You have Barack Obama, who seems to be joking about aliens being real, saying there might be a conspiracy to hide it from him. Then you have Donald Trump, who responds by saying Obama was giving out classified information. For people who follow Hellier's theory, they point to this and say, see, maybe that's a clue. So you hear all this, and it's a monumental, maybe even terrifying scenario. So what was Hellier's final message to all of us? What are we supposed to do? For Hellier, the root of this whole problem wasn't really political or financial. It was spiritual. It was moral. He believed that this cabal could only exist, could only thrive, because in the post-war period, our whole world shifted its values. We started to worship money, power, and greed. And so for him, the only real way out, the only solution, was for us to fundamentally change what we value as a society. And his advice for what to do if this grand deception ever happens. It wasn't a call to arms, not a call for violence or panic. It was much simpler. It was a calm, collective refusal to play along. Just wave at them and say, hey, we know you're playing games with us, and we're not going to go along with it. And that really leaves us with one last thing to chew on. You know, whether you believe a word of Paul Hellier's specific claims or not, his conclusion brings up a really fascinating question. In a world that seems completely obsessed with money and control, is it possible that the greatest power of all isn't found in any of that, but instead in just a collective change of perspective, a shift in our own minds? Definitely something to think about.